3 months' salary for the severance package. Any thoughts, Clara? I nodded, took the folder, and said, "Thank you." That's it? Morgan looked almost disappointed. Maybe he expected me to argue or threaten a lawsuit, something he could spin to the board about how difficult I was. My name is Clara Hale. I'm 56 years old. For nearly 2 decades, I've been the chief engineer at Metatrix Systems, a company that runs the tech infrastructure for over 60 hospitals nationwide. The system I built isn't just software, it's the backbone for everything from appointment schedules and patient data to prescriptions and equipment processing. During the termination meeting, Morgan Steele spoke while his eyes stayed glued to a cost analysis spreadsheet. We can replace you with two younger engineers, AI assisted, at half the cost. Morgan Steele, the new CTO, was hired from the banking sector. He's 42, with flawless designer glasses and an MBA. He was brought in to modernize operations, which clearly started with firing the most experienced staff under the guise of cutting operational costs. I left the meeting room and began clearing my desk. 19 years packed into a single box. Under the averted glances of my colleagues, I walked down the hallway without looking back. They think I'm just a cog that can be replaced by artificial intelligence and a fresh, cost-effective team. They don't see the layers of code I wrote when there was no roadmap. They can't measure how many times I kept the system from crashing with nothing but professional instinct. And no one remembers that I'm the one who made that system run smoothly until today. I'm sad, but I don't feel regret, because they just made a decision they don't even realize they've made. They think they're saving money. They don't know that what they call excess cost is the foundation they can't see, but one I've been building stronger every single day. I sat on the wooden porch of the small house overlooking the Maine coast, cradling a steaming mug of tea. Silver waves rolled against the rocky shore, not fierce, not silent, as if they knew that balance sometimes takes the form of a storm waiting to break. Thomas pulled up a chair and sat beside me, quiet for a while. He's not the type to fill silence with words. We've been together long enough to learn how to share silence like its own language. Then he asked soft, like a brush against memory, "What are you going to do now?" I shrugged. The answer didn't come from thought, but from somewhere deeper, slower. "Whatever comes, will come." Thomas nodded as if that was enough for him, but I knew he carried worries he'd never push me to face before I was ready. Truth is, I wasn't as calm as I seemed, nor was I as aimless as my answer suggested. I was waiting for one thing, the one thing I was certain would happen. Thomas poured more tea into my mug, a familiar gesture he always did when I curled inward. "I know you won't stay still for long," he said, his eyes still on the sea. I gave a small smile, unsure if I believed it as much as he did, but I knew staying still wasn't about being lost. It was about watching how the world would run without the thing I'd quietly kept from falling apart. I can still remember the smell of the first office at Bay Medical, the predecessor to Metatrix. Systems, a mix of old photocopier toner, damp brown paper, and weak coffee, blended with the clatter of keyboards in a space too quiet for a company trying to grow. They had 3 desktop computers. All of them were outdated and sluggish. I sat at a desk by the window where drafts slipped through the glass, rattling a taped-up sheet of office rules. Margaret Bay, the founder, handed me a black and white org chart and said, "We don't need complex solutions, just something that doesn't break." I looked around, then back at her. "I'm not starting with software. I'm starting with how the hospital runs." She nodded. "Good." I didn't write code that first week. I walked through clinics, ERs, equipment storage, and even admin offices. I asked how they scheduled appointments, tracked patient records, ordered supplies. Some places still use carbon paper. Others had whiteboards with marker pens. Then I built the first system, a scheduling module for patient visits. I wrote every line during a long evening after everyone had left the office. The interface was simple, but let nurses enter data in no more than 3 steps. I built the system like someone rebuilding a house after a flood. Not fancy, just solid. Every new feature I added was written to scale without needing to rewrite the core. It all ran on an internal platform I designed myself because buying an external solution would have cost more than the entire monthly operating budget. For the first 8 years, I had no team, no assistant. Every time the system glitched, I fixed it. Every time a hospital added a process, I rewrote the logic. Every Friday night, I manually backed up all the data onto 3 hard drives stashed in 3 different spots around the company. I did it because I believed if no one else would protect the system, I had to do it first. I worked near round the clock, not out of ambition, but because I knew if this system failed, a doctor might miss a shift, a patient might wait in the wrong room, or medical staff might collapse under the chaos. But then Margaret retired. Her son, Justin Bay, took over for a few years before selling the company to an investment fund. Bay Medical became Metatrix Systems. A new sign went up. The office was repainted a sterile white, and a few core values posters were hung. I was kept on, at least at first. "You're part of the company's history," Justin said in a brief meeting. "But the future will rely on more modern technology." Modern technology, in their eyes, meant slick interfaces, cloud integration, and bundled quarterly financial reports. They hired young consulting teams who tossed around terms like operational automation, infrastructure restructuring, and minimizing reliance on senior personnel. I wasn't invited to the first system architecture review. They sent me a summary report with advice. Focus on maintaining the current system until the transition is complete. I remember rereading the phrase, transition is complete. It didn't say it outright, but I knew exactly what it meant. One evening, while I was fixing a minor bug in the ER shift coordinator, Thomas walked into my office. He leaned against the door, arms crossed, silent. "I think, if you knew they'd replace you, why not leave better documentation?" he asked. I paused, staring at the screen that had gone dark after 3 minutes of inactivity. "They always promised a budget to hire a documentation team," I said, eyes fixed on the blinking cursor. "Always next quarter, and next quarter never came." I once had a conversation with Morgan Steele in a small meeting room back when he was still making an effort to be polite. "We need to start documenting the system," I said, pointing to the back-end architecture diagram taped to the glass board. "It's not just for maintenance, it protects the company from relying too much on a few individuals." Morgan looked at me over his thin-rimmed glasses. He nodded, but it wasn't quite agreement. "Documentation takes people and hours. The current budget can't prioritize it," I responded calmly, without raising my voice. "Without documentation, if just one person leaves at the wrong time, the whole platform becomes a black box." He didn't reply. He flipped to the cost section of his report as if the conversation was over. After that, I submitted 2 more proposals. One for a dedicated team to compile system processes. Another for knowledge transfer through training sessions. Both were deferred. The note from finance needs re-evaluation. I started to feel the space around me closing in. Strategic planning meeting invites arrived without my name on the list. Major project emails only CC'd me at the bottom or left me out entirely. In a quarterly meeting, Morgan told the leadership team, "We need to shift from manual, person-heavy systems to a scalable operating model." No one mentioned my name, but everyone understood. I didn't push back. I didn't send complaint emails. I didn't corner anyone in the hallway demanding a clear explanation. I just observed and remembered.
Remembered how the young engineers fumbled when navigating data flows between the old and new systems. Remembered the hesitant look on the clinic manager's face when the new software misscheduled vaccinations. Remembered passing by the meeting room where I used to sit at the center, now overhearing buzzwords like automation, team optimization, and phasing out the outdated. They called me part of the old ecosystem. Maybe they were right, but what they didn't understand was that the old was carrying the weight of work the new hadn't even touched. One late evening, I ran into Diane, the head of HR, in the elevator. She looked at me, hesitated for a few seconds, then spoke like it was a confession. "I didn't think they'd push you out this fast," I smiled. "I'm still here." But I knew absence isn't always about a seat at the table. It starts when your voice stops being heard and ends when your silence becomes too comfortable for those making the decisions. The first call came on Tuesday morning. I was in the kitchen preparing breakfast when the phone buzzed softly on the wooden counter. Caller ID, Morgan Steele. I let it ring until it stopped. No need to answer. I could guess the message. 30 minutes later, a text from Diane in HR popped up. "Clara, the appointment scheduling system is having widespread issues. Hospitals can't process automatic follow-up bookings. Please call me back when you can. We'd love to work with you as a consultant." I set the phone down and kept stirring the teapot. This was what I'd warned about many times in countless meetings, in
Proposals that were never read past the first page. By noon, Thomas walked in holding his iPad. Healthcare tech news is buzzing. Metatrix is addressing a critical issue in its patient care coordination system. Sounds like they kept it quiet for a day, but not anymore. I didn't respond. I was reading an email from a hospital in the Northern Branch network. "Clara, our inpatient clinic has gone back to paper registration temporarily. Is it true you left the company? Please confirm." I didn't reply, not out of coldness, but because I knew when things start to crumble, people will turn to whoever once kept them standing. That evening, the third call came. This time, it was Diane, not hiding her urgency. "We're prepared to pay $500 an hour for emergency consulting. The medication dispensing system has a critical error. Data is stuck at the second processing layer, and no one knows the path." I listened until she finished, then responded in an even tone, not cold, not soft. "I have another interview lined up." Diane paused for a beat. I didn't give her time to regroup with a follow-up. I thanked her sincerely and hung up. I didn't need to shout that I was right. I didn't need to go back and fix the mistakes of people who dismissed my warnings as noise. I wasn't angry, but I made my choice. And once I walked out that door, I didn't look back. Late that night, Thomas poured me a small glass of wine. We sat in the warm darkness with only the golden glow of the porch light reflecting off the still lake. "Do you feel vindicated?" he asked. I shook my head. I just feel lighter." And in that moment, I understood. I didn't need to defeat them. I just needed to move forward toward a door they no longer had the power to open. I arrived on time for my first meeting at Aurelia Health Tech. There was no PowerPoint in the conference room, just a large printed system diagram spread across the table. Amani Brooks, the CTO, invited me to sit across from her and placed a fine tip marker in front of me. "You don't need to review everything. I just want to know, if you could keep 3 layers of the old architecture, what would you save and what would you cut?" I studied the structure in silence for 3 minutes. It was a rare kind of quiet I'd never experienced at Metatrix. There, I was always expected to answer immediately, sometimes before the question was even finished. Here, they waited for me to think, not just to nod. I marked 3 choke points: where data was being duplicated, where security was compromised by external plugins, and an old processing layer everyone thought was fine but was slowly becoming a bottleneck. Keep the internal coordination module, I said. Scrap the secondary data layer and replace the entire reporting system. It's just for show, not operations. Imani nodded, not asking why. Maybe she already knew. She just needed confirmation that I saw what they hadn't yet said out loud. For the first time in years, I wasn't stepping into a system to patch it up. I was stepping in to redesign it from the inside with a clear budget, veto power, and trust that didn't come with hourly check ins. They didn't hire me to fix bugs. They brought me in because they wanted to rebuild the foundation. After the first strategy meeting, Imani handed me a project list, a temporary org chart, and a blank line. System Architecture Lead, Oversight of Technical Decisions and Development Team Coordination. You won't need to handle administrative management, she said, but all proposals for staffing, implementation methods, and system architecture will go through you before approval. I nodded, not because it was power, but because I understood. Without influence from the start, I'd be stuck fixing mistakes midway through again. In my first week, I didn't request new hires right away. I reviewed the entire current architecture, overlapping reports, a fragmented patient record system, a billing module cobbled together from 3 different platforms. I called it a map of a city built on short-term decisions. I sent an internal assessment to Imani with a note at the end. To run for the next 10 years without collapsing, we need 3 people: a data specialist, a veteran systems engineer, and someone who's not afraid to ask questions. 3 days later, HR sent me a list of qualified candidates. I picked 2. They weren't polished presenters, but they asked the right questions. They'd survived late night data recoveries and knew what shouldn't happen twice. At Metatrix, I wrote code at night because no one approved a team budget. Here, I drafted system designs during work hours and was asked to train the next person to understand them from the first line. One day, Imani stopped by my desk, studying the system diagram, and said, "We'll start tomorrow with this first blueprint." That weekend, I got a message from Juliana, my old colleague at Metatrix Systems, who had quietly endured more than she should have. "Clara, before I quit, I accidentally saw the executive meeting minutes. Morgan had planned to push you out from the start of the quarter. Main reason? You were a barrier to Metatrix being acquired. They wrote it plainly. Reduce reliance on senior personnel by standardizing infrastructure. Cut before June." I sat in silence, not out of shock, but because every line felt so familiar. I'd seen them in the risk analyses I'd written myself. The only difference was, this time, I was the part highlighted in red. Juliana called. Her voice trembled, unguarded. "Are you angry?" I answered. "No, I just feel sorry for people who think they're doing the right thing by removing the last person who understands how everything actually connects. Metatrix didn't fire me because I wasn't capable. They fired me because I made them feel less than fully in control. At Aurelia, I didn't have to hide my ambition. I was allowed to use it to build a system that could run not because of me, but because of the principles I left behind. A month after I left, Metatrix started showing cracks. Not full-scale system crashes, but a series of scattered errors. Patient appointments scheduled in the wrong time zones, clinic data misaligned with pharmacy inventories, invoices stuck in limbo with no one able to pinpoint why. Those who stayed tried to manage, but no one dared touch the core layer because everyone knew that was once my domain, and no one had left a map. In an emergency meeting, Morgan proposed swapping in a third-party system as a quick fix. No one had the nerve to say it outright. Metatrix didn't lack tools. It lacked someone who understood how those tools connected. Clients started complaining. Then some pulled back on maintenance contracts. But it wasn't until Westward Medical Group, the largest healthcare network in the Northeast, announced their withdrawal that Metatrix truly shook. Westward wasn't just a big client, they were a trailblazer. Their system supported over 10,000 medical staff and nearly 1 million patient visits annually. They didn't leave quietly. They issued a statement. The closing line was blunt. We need a system that runs reliably, not just on paper. Goodbye, Metatrix. Imani called me early in the morning, her eyes still betraying a flicker of shock. They want to switch to Aurelia, the whole operation. But they have one condition: the new system must be designed and implemented by you. And the timeline is 12 weeks. I set my teacup down on the table. 12 weeks, I repeated, as if gauging the true depth of an undeniable request. Imani continued, more measured. If we pull this off, it won't just be Westward. Their satellite partners, data providers, even insurance organizations are watching. Clara, if we succeed this time, Aurelia won't just be a replacement anymore. We'll take the lead. I looked out the glass window. In my mind, it wasn't about charts or market share. It was about the first time someone asked me to lead from principles. Not to fix, not to salvage, but to build from the ground up. I'll do it, I said. But on one condition: the entire system must be documented. Every processing layer, every architectural decision. No, we'll get to it later. No deadlines come first. If we want it to last, we can't repeat the old mistakes. I wasn't building a system. I was rewriting the rules. By the 4th week of the Westward project, the system started to push back. A simple synchronization process between two regions lagged by 3 minutes. Small, but in a surgical scheduling system, 3 minutes could mean a patient lying in a hallway clinging to life, with no one knowing why their name hadn't been called. Then came the billing layer. Insurance data from Virginia didn't align with the new retrieval structure. An API failed to return the correct status. A legacy subsystem sent conflicting signals. Each error was minor but deeply embedded. The young tech team was overwhelmed for the first time, drowning in error logs they'd never seen before. I didn't get angry. I didn't point fingers. I just said, every issue is a question the system is asking. Our job is to answer with reason, not emotion. I proposed halting the next phase of deployment for 3 days, not out of fear, but to rewrite the data flow model explanation end to end in language humans could understand and implement. 12 weeks later, the system didn't just work. It was scalable, explainable, and transferable. No one needed Clara to handle it alone anymore. Everything I wrote, anyone could read, and everyone on the team understood it. After the system handover, Westward sent an internal trust report to 3 other healthcare networks. Not a sales pitch, just a single line at the bottom of a performance chart: system incidents, 0. Response time, under 90 seconds. Operational documentation, complete. The right people came looking. Aurelia became the most trusted partner for hospitals. And when word leaked that Metatrix was negotiating a controlled dissolution, I wasn't surprised. They weren't defeated by competitors. They were eroded by the very things they'd once deemed can wait. Metatrix didn't collapse overnight. It lost trust, piece by piece. After Westward Medical's quiet exit, 3 more healthcare networks canceled contracts within 2 months. Each departure took a chunk of budget, a slice of live data, and left a cold question no one in the C-suite dared answer. Do you still have the capacity to fix issues and maintain the system? Meanwhile, the system I built for Aurelia ran quietly, but it was noticed, not for flashy features, but because it didn't force people to make excuses for machine errors. A doctor from Maine wrote in an internal survey, "I don't know what the system is called. I just know that since we started using it, I haven't had to call tech support at midnight." Metatrix tried to hold on. They hired system recovery consultants, renegotiated service packages, launched a brand repositioning campaign. But clinic chains saw the truth in the technical feedback charts. Every support call took an average of 6 hours to resolve. By the end of the quarter, they had no choice but to accept Aurelia's offer. Meditrix's entire system was acquired for a third of its value from the previous year. Imani called me into her office on a quieter than usual morning. They signed. You'll lead the restructuring. Your official title is Director of Technology Integration. I looked out the glass window, well, not out of surprise, but because I needed a moment to remember. The day I left, I thought I'd never come back. Walking through the old headquarters lobby, now called Aurelia North Campus, a few people glanced up then quickly looked away. Not out of hostility, they just didn't know how to face me. I wasn't there for answers from them. I didn't need apologies. I didn't come to prove who was right or wrong. I came to clean up and rebuild from what could still be saved. In the tech room, the servers I'd once spec'd out still sat quietly, but someone had rearranged the power cables, forcing a data analysis cluster to loop from the third floor to the first. A young engineer whispered, "No one dares touch it anymore. They tried once, and things got messier." I didn't judge. I just opened the new system diagram, placed a blank sheet beside it, and said, "We'll start from scratch, but this time everything will be documented so no one has to guess." Imani poked her head in and asked, "Do you want to say anything to the old team? I can arrange a meeting." I shook my head. If they still want to learn, they'll come to me. Once everything stabilized, I stepped down from my leadership role at the start of winter. Imani Brooks was shocked by my decision, but she didn't try to hold me back. She knew you can't keep someone who's ready to leave. The System Engineering Training Center was handed over to Ellie, the first trainee who dared to correct me mid-lecture. I didn't smile then, but I was impressed. Later, I gave her full access to the Westward System design documents, something no one could touch before without sign-off from two departments. That's how I chose my successor. In my final days at the company, I quietly organized the bookshelf in the training room. No one noticed until Justin Bay, Margaret Bay's son, walked in no suit, no assistant or driver trailing behind, just him with a gaze that held no distance anymore. "I'm sorry I didn't come sooner," he said, his voice measured. "My mother once told me, the biggest mistake a leader can make isn't cutting the wrong person. It's failing to realize they were the cornerstone." He paused. "And I understand that now." "Thank you, Clara." I didn't say anything. I didn't need an apology. But I looked at him for a long moment, as if to convey something words couldn't capture. Don't repeat the mistake if you don't want to pay the price. That afternoon, I left the auxiliary building, passing through the corridor connecting to the main office block. Morgan Steele was standing there, alone, no documents in hand. Once a man at the peak of his plans, he now looked weary, no longer polished. He saw me. His eyes froze. "Clara," he took a step forward. "I just left a meeting with Atlantic Health. They canceled their entire investment. The patient record management project I spearheaded, it collapsed in beta." His voice cracked. "I used to think a system could just be outsourced." A pause. "Now I know trust can't be." I looked at him. No pity, no scorn, just calm, like an engineer studying a flawed blueprint. "Some things," I said softly, "you only learn after losing." I walked on. The narrow path led back to the training center. I didn't look back. On my last morning, I arrived earlier than usual. I packed my things and took one final look around. The control room was still quiet, its dashboard lights glowing on schedule. That's when I knew I could step away without leaving a void. Imani Brooks was waiting for me at the door. No small talk, just a warm, gentle look in her eyes. We walked slowly down the long hallway. "Do you have any regrets?" Imani asked quietly. I thought for a moment. I used to regret when my work was undervalued, when my warnings were ignored. But
Then I realized true value isn't about whether people see it. It's about whether it holds strong when no one's watching. Imani nodded slowly. Ellie's doing great, she said. I read her reports and see your influence still there. But it's no longer a burden on your shoulders. You left something behind without tying it to you. To me, that's true empowerment. I gave a small smile. I chose Ellie, not because she followed orders, but because she knew how to do things differently when it mattered. We stopped at the main tech room, the first operations hub I'd designed. Now it was part of a larger system but hadn't lost its original spirit, durable, accessible, and not reliant on one person. Imani spoke suddenly, not looking at me. You once said, for a system to live, it has to understand people, not just serve them. I used to think that was too philosophical for a technical architecture, but now I think it's the only reason it's still running. I didn't respond. I just removed my access badge, placed it on the table, and walked out. The system you left behind, Imani called after me, doesn't need anyone to carry it alone anymore. It runs on its own. And Ellie, she's keeping the rhythm steady. I turned back just once. Then I'm at peace. And I walked on. Not because my responsibility was over, but because I knew someone was holding it right and would hold it for a long time.